guys, so this video is in order to prepare us just in case we don't have actual class. I wanted to make sure that I went over what was going to be required for this week and the pair deck that you guys will be completing if we don't have class. If we have class, then I will be doing this all with you, but in the chance the Blackboard's down or they cancel what they call synchronous learning for this week, that you guys have some clear guidance from me. So today we are doing a pair deck, and so you guys will hopefully watch my video and then we'll complete the pair deck on your own. So the check-in, what you'll be writing for this particular one is what concerns you most about the AP exam. So you know that the AP exam is a DBQ. It is 5 documents. You'll be writing in 45 minutes. So what concerns you most? This is going to hopefully help us figure out what we need to really focus on, or maybe what I can help make you feel better about, help alleviate some of the concerns. We're going to quickly go over the grading for fourth quarter, so to hopefully answer some of your questions. I'm going to cover the rubric of the APUSH exam, and then you're going to practice your thesis statement writing and some HIP review. Okay, so that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. What's due this week? So this week, what you need to do is the Era 4 DBQ. It's found only on Blackboard. It's a timed 45-minute write. So this is a practice DBQ in order to prepare you for the AP exam. It's on Era 4. So the thing is, the optional for this week is Era 4 content review overview and theme 3, the expanding role of the federal government. Those are optional. There's also an overview on the Vietnam War. But since the DBQ is on the expanding role of the federal government in Era 4, it would actually really help you to not only complete the Era 4 content review as well as theme 3 before writing the DBQ, because those will in essence be your notes that you need for writing this DBQ. So it is in your best interest to complete those first, then complete the DBQ and turn in the Era 4 content review and the theme 3 review if you would like them to be counted for your grade into Google Classroom, and then the Era 4 DBQ you'll complete on Blackboard. Okay? So grades. Your final grade for this year will be whichever is higher. Either the average of the first, second, and third quarter grades or the first semester grade. So depending on your work completed in fourth quarter, teachers have the discretion to bump up your grade a third of a letter grade. For example, a B to B+. Insist there won't be any fourth quarter grades or points. The only thing that will appear is either proficient, attempted, or did not attempt. So, for example, right now I'm grading every assignment out of 10 points. So you can assume that for every assignment, if you get a 10 out of 10, well, then you're proficient for those assignments. If you get less than a 10 out of 10, well, you may only have gotten attempted. So if your assignment isn't done well, I'm not going to give you proficient. Now, proficient isn't 100%. Proficient is, an A or a B. So you can get proficient without doing A++ work. It's proficient. It's not exemplary. But you do need to get close to A work in order to get that proficient mark. If you get attempted, then that will be taken into consideration. And then, of course, did not attempt is a way for us to communicate with your parents what you've done and what you haven't. So let's look at some grade scenarios. So scenario 1, you have a C- for first and second quarter, which means that you had a C- for the semester. But third quarter, you started to kick it into gear. You got a B-, which means that your average as of March 12th was a C. Now, if you keep up with everything on time, that means that you get a C+ as a final grade, which is pretty positive if you think about it. Now, scenario 2. Same scenario, okay, but you do little or no work, your grade doesn't change. If we look at scenario 3, let's say you had a B- every quarter, first and second quarter, and then third quarter you hit what we call the third quarter slump. You start getting worn down, a little tired, maybe you forgot to turn in some of those reading guides, or maybe you forgot to take a reading quiz or two. Then you would have, your average would be a C+, but your semester average is a B-, Well, if we were to just go based on that, okay, so thus scenario 4, where you do little to no work, you would get the B minus, the semester grade. But let's say you keep up with everything on time. That means you could bump up to a B. This is a good deal for you guys, because what this does is it allows you to actually improve your grade based on fourth quarter. So this is where I'm going to be looking for a majority of proficient work from you. I will take into consideration whether or not maybe your work, some of your work is attempted and some of your work is proficient, but you do all of the work, including the optional or the required. Or maybe you get proficient on everything, but you only do the required. That's still something to bump you up for. So those are things to take into consideration. Okay? Now, the new A-Push rubric. So the rubric has gone from 7 points to 10. And what I'd like to do is point out some of the key differences. So thesis, 1 point, no change. Contextualization, no change. You want to gel, right? We talked about this a little bit. You want to give the broader topic, give an example or example evidence, and then link it back to your argument. That's your gelling. Okay. Now, these 3 points here, we'll see that's a little bit different. You get a point for just describing 2 of the documents. Then if you not only describe those documents, but you also support your argument with them, then you get 2 points. Now, this was only 1 point in the original rubric. Now you get 2 points for this. You get a third point if you support the argument with 4 documents out of the 5. So similar to that 6 document mark on the previous rubric. For HIP, there's no change in expectations, but whereas you had to do HIP for 3 documents in order to get 1 point, now you get a point per HIP that you complete, with a max, of course, being 2. Outside evidence, you got 1 point for using 1 piece of outside evidence, but now they're giving you a 2nd point if you use 2 pieces of outside evidence. Okay, and then complexity synthesis, there is no change. So, hopefully, if you guys have any questions about the rubric, you can email me. I'm actually really hoping that we can meet in chat to talk about the rubric, because I think that if you have any questions, they might come up. So it might be one of those things that I offer some time to talk about this in office hours. But if you were thinking about a question right now, I'm actually going to add a area to the Pear Deck so that you guys can submit any questions that you might have about the rubric here so that I can look at them and be able to answer them next time. So let's look at an Era 5 document DBQ. Some reminders about how, Era 3 5 document DBQ. Reminders on how to break down the prompt. Prompts tend to follow the same format and have the same components. Evaluate the extent. So what does that mean? It means how much. How much does this? What's the topic of the essay? What's the historical reasoning skill? And then what's either a subset of the topic or additional step of analysis and the time frame. Okay? So, what you're going to do for this slide is you're going to use the colors of each question to highlight the prompt. So, for example, what does that mean? So, write it in red at the bottom. What's the topic of the essay? Highlight that in blue. What's a historical reasoning skill? Highlight that in yellow. What's a subset of the topic? So what's it, or an additional step of analysis? What's something else you need to consider? And the time frame? Highlight that in green. Then we're going to look at a thesis. We need to continue to practice our complex thesis statements. You guys are getting pretty good at those in your LEQs, but I want to make sure that we continue to work on those. A thesis requirement responds to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. During this point, the thesis must make a claim that responds to the prompt rather than restating or rephrasing the prompt. The thesis must consist of 1 or more sentences located in one place, either the introduction or conclusion. Please put it in the intro. You don't want to put in the conclusion, plan on putting in the conclusion, and not having time to write a conclusion. So make sure you put it in that introductory paragraph, just like you've been doing all year. Remember, a complex thesis statement is although X, Y because of A, B, and C, as one example. Or it could be although X because of A, B, and C, blank Y, or why, but because of A, B, and C, although X. So there you see a progressive era, and so era 7, thesis statement being broken up into the uh, 5 different parts. So for this, you have to what extent did the ideals of American womanhood change between the American Revolution and the outbreak of the Civil War? Use the documents and your knowledge of the time period, knowledge of the time period 1776 to 1861 in constructing your response. And what you guys will do here is write your complex thesis statement. Then we have to look at HIP. This chart is to remind you of HIP. So you have your historical context, connect the document to specific historical events and ideas or broader regional, national, global processes, and explain why the situation is important to understanding the doc. So think when or where and when was the source created, what was going on when the document was created, think chronologically or in idea groups. What's going on in the nation or the world that makes this document important? The intended audience. Identify person or group and explain why that audience or message is relevant to them. To whom is the author speaking? And this isn't just the American people, right? Intended audience is very specific. A lot of times intended audience might be when you're making a address to Congress, or maybe it's a political cartoon. That's always where intended audience is really good. Intended audience is not good when it's a graph, or when it's a person that you don't know and you don't know necessarily why they wrote this. How might the audience been affected by the content of the source? What's the reliability of the source? If this is written by Star Magazine or Us Weekly, we might consider it less reliable than, say, the Wall Street Journal. So you have to think about that as well. Is the audience one which the speaker belongs to? Is it a northerner writing to a southerner? Is it so is there going to be some sort of criticism? Is this an immigrant talking about a wealthy businessman? Right? There might be some differences. Purpose. Explain the goal sought by the author and why it's relevant to the argument. Try not to say the purpose of the document is without putting in one of these verbs. This document tries to persuade, it tries to question, oppose, justify, inspire, expresses outrage, discredits, exposes, distinguish, propose. You can read all the rest. Why did the author create this document and what were they trying to accomplish? I find that this is the easiest for me to use, but you may find others more easy than this one. And then point of view. You may know who the author is. If it's Samuel Gompers, you know that he founded this AFL. American Federation of Labor. If you don't remember that, hopefully now you do. If it's Alexander Hamilton, you know he created the nation's first financial plan. So the author's background might explain how or why it impacts their argument. So think about gender, age, values, political party, religion, allegiance to other groups, occupation, or socioeconomic status. So what you're going to do for the remainder of this chat is you're going to write one part of HIP for each of the 5 documents. Now the thing about HIP, remember, is you get 1 point for 1 point for each of 2 documents that you have to do HIP for, but you only have to do one part of HIP. So one of the skills is figuring out which is the most valuable HIP to use. So this is written by a Philadelphia woman. This is Benjamin Rush. You might want to know who he is. But this is a chart. Think to yourself, what did I say would not be a good HIP for this? If you said intended audience, ding, 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 you're right. So you might pick a different part of HIP for this. Maybe historical context. Maybe purpose. What is this trying to persuade or share? Okay? What's the historical context of 1837? And why are women wage earners during that time important? And then you've got Putnam's monthly magazine of American Literature, Science, and Art. And then Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of Slave Girl. If this looks familiar, you've read part of this before. Okay? And then, of course, a reminder about what's due this week. So this is all that you're going to be submitting in class. So this is going to be your quote-unquote classwork. And then your homework for this week will, of course, be the Arrow 4 DBQ, and then optional is the Arrow 4 content overview and theme 3. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope I'm recording this and I don't need to post it, but if I do, please make sure you email me with any questions, and I will continue to be in touch on a daily basis at the very least. Have a wonderful day.